keep your hands up, please.
So hand up if you think social media are compatible with humanist principles. Oh, more hands going up.
I won't vote.
Neutrality.
Okay. Now,
hands up if you think that social media are not compatible with humanist principles or values. Hands up. And it's 5. Okay.
17-5.
Abstentions?
Steve, I'm going to.
There's an abstention. Okay. 17 to 5.
Jeff, did you vote?
Well, we don't vote. We're.
I counted Stella's vote.
Oh, my hand up was very high.
Oh well, then 5 becomes 6. You need every vote I can get. All right.
Yes, so yeah, that's about when I got the numbers. Okay, thanks, Cassie. Hi everyone, I'm AJ. For those who don't know me, I work with the committee, and I'll be helping just facilitate the conversation. So just to clarify, we've got 17 votes for saying that social media are compatible at the start of the evening, and 6 votes against. So we'll see how that changes at the end. So I'm going to hand over to is it Jeff going first?
Yeah.
On to tell us why social media are not compatible with humanist values. Jeff?
Okay, well, actually, I want to start by thanking everybody for coming. It's always gratifying to see that somebody wants to hear what we all have to say. The idea for this conversation came up in December last year, well before Cambridge Analytica hit the news, well before the height of the exposure of Twitter and Facebook's involvement in both the U.S. presidential election and the Brexit referendum came to fore. So at the time, we didn't realize this was going to be such an important topic on everybody's mind, but I think it's becoming more and more important. I'll start by saying that I call myself a conscientious objector when it comes to using social media. You could call me an abstentionist. It means about the same thing. And of course, Stells is an enthusiastic user. And Stells and I met about, I think it was in late March, to sort of share some of our ideas in advance, but we haven't since got together, so some of the things that she'll say will be a surprise to me, and some of the things I'll say will surprise her. But I have a general feeling of what Stell's view is on this. And I want to start out by saying I accept everything she will say about how positive and beneficial her use of social media is. I don't disagree with it, and in fact, I didn't tell her at the time, but I have to confess that I have a sense of envy that she gets such pleasure and enjoyment from the use of social media, which I am abstaining from, enjoying myself. But I have concerns, and I want to bring those up in this introductory talk. But since we posed it as whether or not social media are compatible with humanist principles, I'd like to spell out what I think are sort of 5 humanist principles that we're all sort of likely to agree on. Now, as humanists, we don't have a holy book or a catechism, and you may disagree with some of these, but I would say that if you look around at humanist writings, generally it's said that humanism is a life stance aiming at maximizing human fulfillment. So keep that principle in mind. Humanism affirms the worth, dignity, and autonomy of individuals. Keep that one in mind. Humanism supports democracy and human rights. Humanists make their ethical decisions based on reason, empathy, and a concern for their fellow human beings. And humanists strive for honesty in personal relations. So those are the principles that I'm going to try to judge social media against. I give you a definition of what social media are, but I assume you all have a feel for what they are. I'll tell you by example that it includes such things as Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, WhatsApp, and a whole bunch of others. I don't even know the names of most of them. The ones I named are generally for English-speaking people, but Facebook is worldwide. But I'd like to start by quoting something that Mark Zuckerberg said way back at the time when he was founding Facebook, which he claims to have founded while he was a Harvard College student, and it was at that time for the purpose of introducing classmates to each other. Some said it was a dating app, but it was really more just for the purpose of getting people to know each other and connect their personal details with a face, and that's why it was a Facebook. So in 2004, the Winklevoss twins sued Mark Zuckerberg, claiming they had invented the idea of Facebook while they were classmates at Harvard with Zuckerberg. And as part of the lawsuit, as happens in the US, there was discovery. The lawyers for each side were able to grab the documents and computers of the other side and look at them. And Zuckerberg had to give up his laptop, and on his laptop were messages, text messages that he'd been sending to all his friends and acquaintances. And here's what I want to quote from verbatim, and trigger warning, there will be vulgar language at the end. It's his, not mine. So Zuckerberg says to his friend, "Yeah, so if you ever need info about anyone at Harvard, just ask. I have over 4,000 emails, pictures, addresses, social security numbers." And the friend says, "What?" Exclamation point, question mark. "How'd you manage that one?" And Zuckerberg answered, "People just submitted it. I don't know why. They trust me, dumb fucks." And so at the outset, the man who claims to have created Facebook had the attitude that the people who trust him were, dumb fucks. And I think that that still, in some way, permeates the culture of at least some of the social media that people use. So I'd like to talk about the business model of Facebook as an example. Of course, they're all different, but Facebook being the most successful, having 2 billion users worldwide now, it's, I think, useful to talk about its business model. So Facebook works by capturing and holding on to the attention of its users. And while the attention of its users is captured, Facebook conducts intensive surveillance of the personal details of the user. All aspects of the person's life, intimate details that possibly weren't intended to be shared. And then Facebook sells access to your attention, if you're a user, to commercial and political exploiters, people who want to separate you from your money or people who want to separate you from your vote. So the business model is to grab attention, hang on to attention, conduct surveillance, and then sell access to your attention to the people who think they can make money or make political success out of getting a hold of your attention and sending you a message. So in effect, anyone who logs onto Facebook or other social media is in a sense working for free. Because while you are logged on, that social medium is surveilling your personal details and telling other entities that they've got your attention, and those other entities should be willing to pay for access to your attention by flashing you an advertisement or a message or a story or whatever. So that's the basic business model. It's why users of social media don't pay anything, because you are the product, you're not the customer. The customer of Facebook and Instagram and Twitter are the people who pay to send advertisement or political messages to the users of the social media who use it for free. Of course, it keeps your attention because, as Stels will tell you, it provides you all of these wonderful benefits. It really does provide a useful service in connecting people to each other, enabling people to stay in touch with each other, and so on. And that's how the attention-grabbing aspect is successful. But what Facebook and Twitter and the others want to do is they want to make money from that. They're not doing this as a boon to humanity. So here are some of my concerns. Social media, we know from their own employees telling us and from scholars who have studied them, social media employ the research findings of social psychology and behavioral economics, among other disciplines, to find out how best to grab the attention of people and how best to hold on to their attention. And the techniques the social media employ from these scientific disciplines are used to capture your attention and also to change your behavior. And they do that by appealing to emotional triggers, unconscious biases, almost anything but logic and reason. And that's the first point on which I find social media are incompatible with humanist values. By attempting to manipulate the users through non-rational means, social media undermine the autonomy of the individual, which, as I said at the outset, I think is an agreed principle of humanism, that we try to support the autonomy of individuals. Another thing that I find objectionable is that the algorithms employed by the software of social media choose what each person or what each user will experience while logged on. And again, I think that that's an assault on the autonomy of the individual and is not compatible with humanist principles for that reason. Another aspect that I find objectionable is that social media seem to have an inherent tendency to fragment and atomize their users into like-minded small groups. Liking and friending and those kinds of things on social media promote a kind of tribalism. And tribalism is both a rejection of the dignity of each and every individual and is therefore inconsistent, I think, with humanism. So to the extent that social media atomize us, break us up into small groups, I think that they are undermining the dignity of individuals. Another aspect that I object to is targeted news feeds. Targeted news feeds from social media tend to create what's been called information silos. People seem to place themselves in silos where they only listen to what they want to hear, or at least what the social media think they want to hear, and they don't know anything else that's going on in the world around them. Society becomes polarized when each of its individuals are in an information silo, not knowing what other people are thinking, what other people are hearing, what other people are knowing, what other people are experiencing. And to the extent that we rely less and less on information that can be published publicly and critically challenged, because it's confined to only a small select audience, I think that social media tend to undermine and form a threat to democracy. If we don't know what our fellow citizens are hearing and saying to each other, we can't function effectively as a democracy. We can't come to consensus with each other. We can't ameliorate our differences by conducting conversations if we're all confining ourselves voluntarily or involuntarily to an information silo. That brings me to the topic of fake news. As it turns out, fake news very frequently gets more clicks from the users, and it's free to produce because you can just make it up, right? So fake news tends to drive out real and truthful news, like the good old-fashioned reporters who worked for print media used to give us. Now, so why would a social medium such as Facebook care if the news that they are streaming over their site is fake? It's not in their interest to assure that the news that they're sending you to your monitors or to your smartphones is accurate. All they care about is the commercial value of whether that news grabs your attention and holds your attention. Because when they grab your attention and hold your attention, they can tell the commercial entities that advertise that they've got people's eyeballs glued to the screens. And that's how they get advertising fees that make them money. So I think there again, fake news tends to undermine the autonomy of the individual because it treats the individual as a fool who can be fooled. And I think it also prevents the fulfillment of human beings. If you're living in a world of false facts, the potential to fulfill your capabilities in life has to be hindered. Reality is what you need to recognize in order to fulfill yourself in the real world. Fake news undermines that. Also, fake news is an attack on democracy, because if people are being given false information of a political nature, they may be induced to vote in a way that is other than they would have voted if they had been given correct and unbiased information. And then there are the fake people. We know that there are vast numbers of accounts that purport to be real people that are fake. They're on Twitter, they're on Facebook, they're on probably all the social media. They seem to establish an ambiance on social media. The fake ones seem to be putting out the most emotive messages, the most emotive dispatches to other people on the medium, and therefore they get the most attention, and they sort of determine the culture or the ambiance of the medium. That's why, for example, Twitter, you have so many, utterly nasty messages on Twitter. Many of them are generated by bots, by automated software that is not a real person, but is a fake person. I think that fake entities, they are called bots or fake reviewers of products or fake friends, fake followers. You can buy followers on Twitter if you want. You can actually pay to, say that you have 400,000 Twitter followers. It only costs about $2,000 to get that. All of those fake persons or entities create a sort of a synthetic and false social pressure. And we as individuals are all, subject to social pressure. And so if social pressure is falsely generated, we're being manipulated by something that isn't real. I think that undermines the autonomy of individuals, and it prevents the fulfillment of individuals. It also is an undermining of democracy and human rights, in my view. Academic researchers have looked into the effect of use of social media, and it's usually Facebook that is the subject of these researches. And they found that people who spend the most time on social media, such as Facebook, tend to feel bad after using it. The more time you spend on social media, the worse you feel. But there's a distinction, and the reason Stells is a very happy person is explained by what the academic researchers found. Those people who use social media in an active way, interacting with other people, as Stells does. People you know, or even people you don't know, but it's the interaction with other people. Those people tend to have their happiness maintained. But it's the people who use social media passively, only watching what other people are posting, what other people are saying. They actually report a reduced sense of well-being in their lives. There's a hypothesis to explain that, but I'm not going to go into it at this time. Finally, I think we all collectively have an interest in sustaining the works of creative and imaginative individuals, whether they're producing art or music or novels or poetry or whatever, all fields of human endeavor. But social media don't share that interest. For example, in 2015, 725 of Facebook's top 1,000 most viewed videos were stolen. They were taken without the permission of the authors and, vastly distributed around the world. That undermines artists, musicians. The music industry has almost been decimated by the availability of free music on the web. I think clearly that is inconsistent with humanist values, because it undermines personal and collective human fulfillment. If you make it hard for our artists and musicians, poets and novelists to make a living because their works are being stolen and given away, we're all harmed by that. So I'd like to stop at this point and listen to Stell's remarks, and then she and I and AJ will have a conversation, and eventually we'll ask you to all join in.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, you're really persuasive. I'm not sure I want to go on it now. Okay, so just to tell you where I'm coming from, really, I find Facebook enriches, not only Facebook, but various different platforms, enriches my life every single day. And I understand there are an enormous amount of reasons why it is a bad force. But I can only speak from my own personal one, and that is that I don't understand why anybody would want to disenfranchise themselves, despite the fact that there are all these terrible dangers. But I think there are lots of dangers in all sorts of things in the world. But maybe we can talk about that when we have our conversation later. So I'm just going to go down my list. Jeff talked briefly about defining what is social media. And I happened to talk to my son last night. My son, actually, his job is to lobby. He works in South Africa, and his job is about empowering people, quite poor, not very well educated people, to empower them with social media to uncover injustices. So when he's lobbying and he has to define what social media is, he's given a great deal of thought to it. So he defines it by saying it's a platform on which separate entities and strangers can interact. They might not know one another, but they are allowed now to have a dialogue and a discussion. So I think you are not including an awful lot of things that I would consider to be social media. So comments on a newspaper. Once you've commented on a journalist's view, then it's open for discussion. So it spills into a whole lot of other areas. YouTube, whole lots of other things. So anyway, I just wanted to say that before I go on. So the reason I started on Facebook was that my then quite young but already adult children urged me to. And I was bowled away because I suddenly had this window into their lives. And all the social things they were doing, and some of the things I didn't like, but I'm very careful about what I claim that I've seen and haven't seen. And all their friends and all these little kids that I used to drive around in my lift club who are now grown-ups, and now they're all interacting with me and they've all befriended me. And it was just extraordinary. So that was a very positive thing for me. The reason that I think it's so good for humanism is that I think humanism and skepticism and secularism has flourished as a result of social media. And I'm not sure many of us would be sitting in this room this evening had it not been for social media. I know, I found these like-minded people through Meetup and Facebook and Twitter. The wonderful thing that if you're a stranger in a city, there's no need to be alone anymore. You can go onto Meetup, you can punch in a keyword, find out a common interest that you might have, pitch up, and you're immediately in a group of like-minded people. Before this came on, your friends, you were stuck with school friends, college friends, neighbours, parents of your children's parents, colleagues, people that you went through the motions of pretending to like them without really having anything in common with them. Whereas now I feel I've been much more selective about my friends. I've jettisoned a whole lot of people that I used to hang around with, and now I hang out with people that I really, really connect with. I wouldn't have been able to do that without social media. So there are the other things, of course. I mean, just the pleasure of sharing photographs, personal experiences. You can spread memes. I mean, a lot of it is quite puerile. They're aphorisms. But a lot of them are really cool, and a lot of them just brighten my day. Community groups. I know Kieran will tell you he's now connected with a whole lot of people in his neighbourhood. He's able to reminisce and share local history, personal photographs with people in his neighbourhood. And they keep an eye on building applications. I mean, from a whole lot of social things to a whole lot of really quite serious things are discussed on there. And old neighbours and school friends that he'd lost contact with for decades and decades and decades. Now he's hanging out with them online. Oh no, I've just lost my... Apart from the social side, I also use it as a news feed. Now, I take your point about us being in a silo. Before social media, I used to just read The Guardian every day. That's a silo, isn't it? Whereas now, into my news feed, I get a whole lot of stuff that causes me great cognitive dissonance every day. I get subjected to having to read articles about the Daily Mail, for goodness sake. So I don't know. And I do try very hard to make sure that I read things that upset me. And I find I'm subjected to a whole lot more nowadays. But I also read things from science journals and The Economist, New York Times. I just find my world has been opened up. I think it's been great for the humanist movement. I think it's been used to discredit anti-vaxxers. I think we've managed to stop NHS funding of homeopathy, largely through activism on social media and creating awareness and making people realise that it is a whole lot of woo-woo. You mentioned academic research. I think the good side of that is, maybe this is a different side of it though, but academics are now publishing their papers online. I think that was a silo before, and a very elitist bubble, whereas now people like me can read and dip into it. Sorry, my laptop is not behaving as I want it to. Give me a second here. It spreads information. Now, this may be a bad thing. I'm not sure. It could be a good thing. It spreads information faster than old media. Breaking news. Think about the Ebola outbreak, Boston Marathon bombings, the Lee Rigby Woolwich attack. The BBC was reeling. They didn't get their act together. Half the population knew about this stuff before they'd got a reporter down there. That might be good, it might not be bad, but I love the way that traditional media is now getting a run for their money. I think it helps students network. I know my other son is a teacher and he shares lesson plans. He follows up with his students. I know Mary can talk about her personal experience that when you were studying as an adult. She might want to mention that later. For me, I've re-established friendships. I've lived in different countries, so for me it's been invaluable connecting up with people in different countries. I would never have been able to find them, but I can punch in their names, and sometimes it doesn't always work. But yeah, and I think it helps individuals to make new friends. In real life, I do have some friends who are exclusively Facebook friends, and I've met them through other real friends, but we get into a dialogue on one another's walls, and we suddenly find that we've got this connection, and we send out a friend request to one another, and we become great friends, and we've never actually met in real life, but I feel this tremendous connection with them. I think it also makes you find out things about your friends that you might not like. I had a friend that I thought was a jolly nice guy. I'd met him on holiday, and all our conversation had been about this wonderful holiday and the sights that we were seeing. Became friends on Facebook, and then when we got back, he started posting things about Britain First. So that was a bit of a wake-up call, but it was good. I want to know that about people. There are these other things. I mean, employers can find employees. It helps job seekers. I think whenever I sign up a speaker here, I try to befriend the speaker. And that's a wonderful way of just keeping in touch and maybe getting references to future speakers. If social media wasn't here, I would give them a hug goodbye at the end of the evening, and then probably our paths wouldn't cross again. But by making that connection, we carry on seeing one another virtually. There's some evidence, I think, to suggest that it improves the quality of life and reduces the risk of health problems. Friends on social media, there's this phenomenon called the contagion effect. So people will urge one another on to exercise, diet, stop smoking, and we can inspire one another and coerce one another to maybe live more healthily. I love the way it gives social movements a quick, no-cost method to organise and disseminate information and to mobilise people. I don't think the Arab Spring would have taken off in quite the same way if it hadn't been for social media. Black Lives Matter, Britain for Europe, and how about the repeal the AIDS? I think a whole lot of people think that maybe that voting wouldn't have gone quite the way that it did had not so many people, that it was able to mobilise a lot of Irish people who were living overseas and motivate them to come back to vote. It's good for the economy. So I'm going to quote a McKinsey Institute study here. Projected income, $1 trillion in 2014. You're going to query me on that. I don't know if that's true.
Is that Mark Zuckerberg's or?
So the thing that because I'm getting on, I'm a woman of a certain age, but one of the fastest growing demographics now are senior citizens, the silver surfers. Now, I used to be terrified about which old age pension care home I was going to end up in. I don't care now if everybody around me is only watching Coronation Street. As long as I've got a Wi-Fi connection, I don't care. I can live in my bubble with interesting people, and they can all play bingo around me, and I don't really care. Police, CCTV footage has been put up. A whole lot of people have ended up. Accountability. I could go on. Have I gone over my 10 minutes? Because I could go.
Yeah.
It's okay, I did too.
Go
ahead, go as long as you want.
So did he, so I just...
Okay, that's right then. Again, with the making money, I think small fledgling businesses who don't have access to big marketing budgets,
Is that what you mean, crowdsourcing?
Yes, I was going to say crowdsourcing as a separate thing, but absolutely, yes. And charities, I mean, how many times because of social media you sponsor a friend who's doing a charity run? I mean, I don't know how you would gather your vast array of friends to be able to get them to contribute to things like that. You can send an email out, but I don't think it's the same. Rapid communication during crises. You can make yourself safe. People have offered refuge to victims. There was the open door to shelter people stranded after the Paris terrorist attacks. So now this is a very personal thing. When my mother passed away and I was standing around the grave, I noticed that all these beautiful cards and tags on the flowers were in the dirt and the rain. So I gathered them up and I made a Facebook profile for her, and I typed verbatim and I took photographs and I put them up. And then once they were up, a whole lot of people who were living overseas and weren't able to come to the funeral, they started putting tributes up. And it grew and it grew and it grew, and that's lovely, because people who were at the funeral were able to see what everybody else had said rather than standing there in the rain and trying to read this running ink. And then all the people that didn't come. And it's a living thing that I know lots of my cousins and extended family, they often pop back and have a good look at it. So I think that's more or less, and I'm not sure I've addressed specifically humanist things, but I think there's an awful lot of altruism and good things in the world. And I get it. I know that there are terrifying things happening out there. And I know fake news, apparently it spreads 6 times faster than real news. You have to be a little bit clever and savvy. And I think, people will say things like, oh, well, you just see photographs of people's food. That's not the medium. That's the friends that you've befriended. And you need to maybe defriend some people and get some friends that post more interesting things. I think one of the downsides is it can spread hate groups. I think radicalisation, it can be an echo chamber. I think there's evidence of identity theft. But hey, people said stuff when the printing press was first arrived. There are always, it is so powerful and so ubiquitous. But I think we've just got to be clever. And for me, the humanist values and the positive values far outweigh the bad things.
Jeff, any comments there?
Oh, do you want to?
Well, I've
Do you want to
got
ask
some
me?
as well, but I thought we could have a bit of a back and forth conversation before we open it up. Or
Yeah, okay. Well, a comment is that I think that your definition of social media is much broader than mine. So,
Yeah.
for example, when you talked about academics publishing online, yes, there's archive, where you put up physics papers, and there are other ones for biological papers and so on. I don't consider that a social media.
No, but I think they are
It's more like a
posting
message
on
board.
Facebook, or they'll
Yeah.
put a link
Yeah.
to these
Okay.
papers.
Crowdsourcing, I didn't consider that to be social media. I approve of crowdsourcing when it's used for, humanistic purposes, but I don't think of that as a social media. It's a tool for raising money, for sure, and it involves many people, but I don't see that as social media. The same with crisis communications. The crisis communications that I think of are the governmental systems that warn tsunami is coming, or the volcano is blowing up, or a hurricane is coming, or that sort of thing. You might be thinking in terms of more informal ones where people warn each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
these hashtags
Okay. Yeah.
that are created
Yeah.
get tremendous momentum.
Yeah. As I said before, I can't deny the benefits that you enjoy from your use of social media. And I think I'm looking at it from the downside, and you're looking at it from the upside.
Glass half full.
Yeah, glass, well, yeah.
perhaps we could go back to the question as well, because so the question was, are social media compatible with humanist principles?
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I sort of focused in on the word compatible there. So what does that actually mean? Does that mean here are a bunch of good things about social media or the internet, or how things overlap there? And here's a
Not
bunch
the
of bad
internet, we're
things?
only talking about social
But
media.
again, as just pointed out, you can crowdsource without social media. It won't be as effective, but is social media just like a nitrous given onto the internet, or an extra added way you can use the internet in a better way? But it's not exclusively, you can crowdfund via email, and you can do other things as well, for example, sign petitions without using social media. But the point was, rather than getting into a list of here are some good things and bad things about social media, what do we mean by compatibility? Do you have any thoughts on that? Are we saying anything bad about social media that harms humanist principles means a whole lot is rubbish? Or are we saying, well, it's a spectrum, it's how much we're prepared to tolerate while still being humanists, on balance? What do you think about that?
Well, surely as humanists we can be very discerning when we're online. I hope I've never ever been a troll, and hope I wouldn't be.
And you mentioned one of the humanist outlooks is critical engagement. So if someone's giving you something, whether it's the Bible or your newsfeed or someone's post, critically evaluate it, use other sources, and try to be. If you're not doing that with the Daily Star or whatever,
Exactly.
then you certainly won't do that with social media.
Yeah.
So it's you that are the problem in that sense. So I think that.
I mean, those things that you talk about, surely Fox News, there are a whole lot of people living in a silo just consuming Fox News every day.
Yeah, my argument would not be that, social media propagate fake news, but so does Fox News, so therefore social media are okay. That wouldn't be my argument. So, yes, there are a lot of other aspects of culture which have negative aspects, that have negative impact on people's lives besides what I say social media does. It doesn't justify the social media, that other people are doing bad things too.
But don't you sometimes want to look at Fox News just to be revolted by it?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Very, very seldom, but I do, yeah.
So again, don't you sometimes want to just dip into social media just so you can...
Yes, sometimes I do. I haven't yet, but I sometimes do.
I haven't.
Although you called me on that. Stell's pointed out that I do use the meetup function that we all use. But I only use it as a calendar reminder. I don't use it to send messages back and forth, so I'm really asocial in my use of the meetup group. So I'm still a social media virgin, I guess.
And I'd like to pick up on something that, when we talk about interacting with social media versus interacting online, so there's been some research on that, on how, because we're not having that face-to-face communication, reading body language, those kind of things, it seems to maybe support Jeff for
Yeah.
a moment here, those can't be replaced online. Even if you are even doing Skype chat, which is not really social media, but video conferencing. But even if you do have that, but so most social media don't have that. Even just looking at photos of someone, what they're
Yeah.
typing, without having the intonation of the voice, without punctuation can't carry that. How do you feel that affects the kind of relationship building that you're talking about?
Yeah, it does, and I think I have sort of offended people at
By
times.
mistake, yeah.
Yeah, well, no, maybe I did mean to, but maybe it sounds more harsh. But what I would say is, sorry, Jeff, did you want to?
No, go ahead. No.
So I'm one of 16 cousins, and I find that, and we tend to only meet up maybe Christmas and funerals. But now when we meet up, because we've already, I know that my cousin's daughter won a ribbon with a horse jumping thing last week.
We've got things to talk about.
We've got so many things. We're already connected, and I can tell that the one or two cousins that don't do social media, they're kind of out of the conversation, and I feel a bit sorry for them, and it takes them about an hour before they sort of integrate.
Can I follow up on something that AJ said, where you mentioned that when you don't have an actual face-to-face engagement with someone, you don't see their facial expressions, you don't hear the intonation of their voice, their body language, and so on. That takes me to another aspect which I didn't want to take up time on, but
psychology, that's what sort of triggered.
well, what I didn't get into is whether social media promote honesty in personal relations, and we do know that people tend to embellish. Improve upon themselves when they create their profiles on social media. And that's, in fact, what some of the researchers felt is a possible reason why passive users of social media feel bad. They go on social media and they see, wow, everybody's beautiful, everybody just flew to Paris for a wonderful dinner, and tomorrow they're going to Tahiti for a holiday. And, everybody is sort of boosting what their real person is like and what their real lives are like. And if you take it to be literally true, well, you're being fooled, and personal relations are not being promoted, or honest personal relations are not being promoted, which is harder to do in a face-to-face meeting. I mean, it's harder to fool somebody if they can read your body language, your face, your intonation, and so on.
Yeah. I agree.
So that hinges on the honesty aspect of honest human interaction.
I think we do, yeah. I on the days when I do feel down, I probably don't go onto social media and tell people that. But if I've had a nice dinner with somebody and it all looked very jolly and happy, and we're sitting in front of lovely food, I would love to post that. So yeah, it's not a true representation.
What do you think, Jeff, about Stelz's point? Older people, less mobile people, if they're in a retirement home or whatever, they're not able to do the normal things that humanists would like to do to meet people, in the real world as well. But this allows them to almost live vibrantly digitally as well.
Yes, I agree. That is something that social media can accomplish, and it's definitely,
if you're bedridden or whatever it is,
definitely a benefit, and certainly completely compatible with humanist principles. We want old people to have the fulfillment that they can enjoy given their circumstances. We want them to be as autonomous as possible. Sure, I think in that respect, social media are fine. Of course, all the while, the old people are being surveilled and possibly being sent advertisements. But no, I think that I don't deny that social media provide people with a great deal of gratifying experience of other people and enable people to make better use of their lives in some ways.
But on balance, you think is it the marketing aspect and the economic and the sort of the manipulation and using people's attention to make money that tips the balance for you in the other way?
It's twofold. It's the surveillance, which I find absolutely repulsive,
which is invasion of privacy.
And the exploitation or manipulation, either to separate you from money or to separate you from your vote. I find that really.
So I don't see any of the ads that they put out.
Okay.
Does that make it better?
Yeah, no, I think so. But are you sure you're not getting ads, or are you sure you're not getting sponsored news that is effectively an ad?
But they declare that it is so. And there's a facility to hide it. Yeah.
That's actually another point that I want to pick up on there as well. So social media, you said at the start that you focus a lot on Facebook and Twitter, and you mentioned it's not just the English-speaking world, but also worldwide. we don't actually know, what do you think about the proposition that we don't actually know what social media could eventually become? And there's certain software within social media to help you do that. So once people realize, it's all very young technology, once people realize, oh, hang on, the newsfeed is becoming siloed, some entrepreneurial person might come up with a way, and they have in many ways, to make it less addictive, make it less of a silo, make it less sort of counteract and compensate for the bubbles. Do you think that's a possibility there that could get you onto social media if you found those trends emerging?
Oh, could get me on? Maybe, but I mean, it wouldn't be commercially successful, so I think that's not really likely to happen on a broad scale. But you mentioned, you mentioned the English-speaking world, and of course that's what we're all mostly fluent in. I didn't have time to bring this up, but there's an interesting phenomenon going on in China. It started out with a photo sharing social medium. I think it's called Y2. I may not be pronouncing it correctly. And the founder of it developed a way to enhance the beauty of people in photographs. And she then went on to make telephones that incorporate the software in the smartphone. So anytime you now take a picture with a Y2 phone, it automatically enhances the beauty of whoever you're photographing. Mostly these are used for selfies. That's the culture in China right now. But it has become the case now where it is deemed impolite to send someone a non-improved photo of yourself. Instagram is also providing that service now too, of making you more beautiful. But so in that sense, it has caused a vast swath of humanity to become concerned with making themselves look, in some sense, more beautiful, more handsome than they are in reality. And very interestingly, the changes to the facial structure tend to make the people look more Western. Surprisingly, yeah. Strange.
Even to Chinese eyes?
The Chinese people, yeah, in this Y2 application.
Although there are some subconscious biases, especially in East Asian cultures, about being fairer and having more of a Western outlook. In Korea, where people get plastic surgery to make their eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's revealing. But is that revealing something that was already there 50 years ago, 100 years ago? It's beauty and consumerism and materialism that is not compatible with humanist values. Social media, again, is that nitrous, that bit of extra exacerbation of this.
It's just revealing.
It's just revealing what's already there.
What's already there,
yeah. But in this case, I think, in the case of the Chinese Y2 social medium, it created a social pressure, which you wouldn't have if you didn't know that 400 million other people are doing this, so you ought to do it too. Yeah, that's what I was talking about when I said that there's a synthetic or a false social pressure that is created by some social media. And there's an academic term for it. I'm looking for it. I think it's, I'll find it. But go on. I'm stumbling here. Let's go on. Yeah.
So I want to pick up on something that you said about how you were first introduced onto social media was sort of getting recommendations through friends or your parents.
My sons originally,
and your children's friends and parents and so on. Do you think that is that actually a healthy way to be introduced to people initially? Given the fact that you were saying sometimes the digital aspect of someone's life, their edited profile isn't really what they really could be like, and you could be led down a kind of a false alley that way. Is that a
but we all wear masks, don't we? Mm-hmm. Maybe it's just a little bit easier to do it online.
So again, that comes back to another thing where it's always been there. This is just allowing us a way to express this.
Yeah, well, it's certainly easier online. And there's a great New Yorker cartoon, there's a dog who's at a computer monitor. On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog, right? So yes, we can all construct these false personae, and it's very, very hard to penetrate them if you don't actually meet the person in the flesh. Well, the thing I was struggling to come up with was that there's a psychological phenomenon in which people are known to look at those around them and to see what other people are doing and what people are wanting, and we then copy them. And it's called mimetic desire. And social media exploit this. It makes you want to do what other people are doing and want what other people are wanting. And without the social media telling you that there are 500 million other people who want this particular thing in their lives, you probably wouldn't want it yourself.
Mm-hmm. So again, that's something that Hollywood movie stars have been sort of focusing. I've been using that to leverage their popularity since the 40s, 50s, and even earlier on before that. But this provides away from that kind of celebrity culture or what their behavior to come into your living room or to come into your device right there, so it's right in front of your face, rather than when you choose to interact with it.
Yeah, maybe.
Do you think that could be a bit more dangerous as stars? Because rather than when you go, you can just say in the 1940s, 50s, I didn't watch movies, so I won't be infected by whatever the celebrity culture is.
But you have a certain amount of control over your feed. I mean, I don't go liking celebrities, and I don't go looking for beauty products on Facebook. I guess once you start doing that, then you get fed with a whole lot of other things.
Yeah.
But there is an addictive aspect.
Yeah.
These social media do use psychological studies to find ways to make the experience more habituating or addictive, so that you start to feel bad if you haven't checked your monitor or your smartphone for 5 minutes or more. I mean, we're carrying around in our pockets, a device that is used these days for mass behavioral manipulation. And we're always checking it, and we're playing into that. I just did it. So, anyway.
Picking up on another aspect of this, which I sort of personally have experienced. People of my generation, I'm not sure how much I speak for them, but one thing that humanists tend to like is nature and being outside and so on. And certainly the group here provide a lot of walks and put them on. I've not been to one. I hate doing that at all. Is that because I'm a child of the internet and social media? Actually, I'm not bad. I guess the millennials will be even worse. I was born in '91, but people who were born in, well, I guess I'm technically a millennial, but really the generation that were born in, the noughties, they, how much are they able to explore and, through with their own eyes, the natural world that we're supposed to be custodians of and stewards of, and the ecology and so on, rather than through the prism of an Instagram filter or through their phone? Does that not take away something from the humanist?
Maybe, but there are lots of hiking groups on Facebook, and I think people are being inspired to get away from this.
But generationally, are there 12-year-olds getting together to go camping and hiking, or are they just being dragged into, because it's at that age as well, isn't there? Because there's certain things where maybe we're all adults, we can discriminate in a way that children can't. And psychologically, they're very vulnerable, and maybe Facebook do know that.
I think
once they're hooked in, and by
is there an age limit to Facebook profile? I think there is, isn't there?
Well,
I think it's 13.
But I think your focus on the young people is important, because one of the humanist principles that most people would agree on is that we should show a concern for other species as well as the human species, and should consider ourselves stewards of the earth. And as children grow up never experiencing the outdoors, because they're always glued to their iPads from the time they're 2 years old or younger, they'll have less and less an appreciation for what the natural world is. They'll be experiencing the virtual world. Oh, and when we get to virtual reality, then it's all downhill from there.
Okay.
Should we throw it open?
Yeah, I think we ought to give the audience has been very patient, and I'm sure they're bursting with questions.
I think we'll just get a mic.
Okay. AJ, you select, okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone have any further questions? Anyone have any burning questions to pick us off with? Andy,
I'm going to ask you to speak very clearly into the mic, otherwise we don't hear your question.
Yeah, Andy.
Thank you.
Hi. I had a couple of alarms going off that I wanted to ask you about. One is social exclusion, which is if you're not part of this network, you're not socially included, which was your example of your cousins. The cousins who are not signed up, who have not signed over all their personal detail to the big business, are excluded socially. And that just has me in alarm straight away. And I think there's lots of other places where there's this social pressure to conform, to be part of this system, which is being ignored. And I think, I'm a counsellor, I see the psychological effects of what's going on in society. And I see people are the most stressed in our history. And I can't point exactly to why social media is in this, but I do believe it's part of it. And this is, that's where I have a problem. And I just want to kind of, I'm not sure where the question is in that, but that's my alarm that I want.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I didn't jump on because I felt coerced. I jumped on because it looked incredibly exciting and I wanted to be a part of it. But yeah, maybe.
Well, it's paradoxical because social media, as Stells use it, connects people, and that, as you point out, it can also atomize people into groups that exclude others. And that sort of tribalistic result of social media is anti-humanistic. And yet, as Stells use it, it's certainly a very pro-humanistic thing.
My example is from Stells.
Yeah.
Your two cousins.
Yeah. 14 of us, wrong.
Well, if you knew her cousins, you wouldn't regret that.
Kieran. Yeah, thanks very much. I think Jeff said you've actually presented me with a whole load of Skittles, and I don't know which one to knock over, but first, certainly, I'll start with the cosmetics thing. I don't look for beauty products, but at the moment I'm building an extension, and there's a huge shortage of bricks at the moment, so I'm quite happy for an ad to come into my news feed that tells me of a local merchant that's got that's got these products that are rare. I'm not big on Facebook, and I think you've probably focused too much. I would like to your definition of what social media is, because to me it goes far beyond Facebook. Yeah. So just whipping through a few things. Fake news has always been around. Churchill made the famous quote about, he didn't call it fake news, but he was talking about lies will travel a lot faster than the truth. Music, you mentioned music. I think that what has happened with music is artists that couldn't get beyond the A&R man have now got careers thanks to social media. It's the people at the top that are complaining, the Bob Dylans, the Rolling Stones, that withdrew all their music from YouTube. It's now back on because they are getting their royalties via that channel. So I've got little sympathy with them. I went to see Richard Dawkins about 6 months ago. The God Delusion has been illegally translated into Arabic and downloaded. It's got 10 million downloads, and 7.5 million of those have been in Saudi Arabia. Now, that wouldn't have happened without social media, particularly in a country that's only got 35 million people. That's a huge step forward in my view, and that wouldn't have happened without social media. I say there's so many Skittles here, but I'll conclude. I think that you've got a pen and paper, and Stell's got a laptop, and I think that might be. I'm sorry, what? That might be telling that you're using a pen and paper, and Stell's is using a laptop. That might be telling.
It was
for a lawyer. It was an intentional.
Subconscious messaging.
No, it was it was making a statement, but I do have an iPad and a laptop and an iPhone, so I am a user of technology. It's very interesting what you said about the Dawkins book. Yeah, it's wonderful that people in Arabia are reading, I suppose it was The God Delusion, or I don't know which one it was. That's wonderful, but what you're saying is basically you're happy that artists' work is stolen, provided the thieves are people you want to have the stolen product in the hands of. He might be too. But there are plenty of people who put out creative work who would in the past have benefited from copyright and therefore have been able to earn a living, who now are just unable to earn a living.
Can I jump in there? Is anybody aware of Jonathan Pye? He's never been on national TV, never been on national radio. Only has got his career going by social media, and he filled up the Hammersmith Apollo last week. And so somebody like that.
Is YouTube social media though? Is that under your definition?
It is.
I think so.
There's two
I would
people who don't
grant
know
that
one
it is.
another.
Yeah. I would grant that it is, yeah.
He's also on Twitter too.
Yeah.
He has a fake Twitter account.
Yeah.
People don't know Jonathan Pye. Jonathan Pye is a made-up.
Tom Watts, yeah.
It's a
It's real
made-up
Tom.
news character, so he has a made-up Twitter account.
Yeah.
And he retweets fake Donald Trump accounts. But you kind of know it if you're in on the joke. It's actually fascinating. As a,
No, I'm in favor of that. Fake Donald Trump accounts, nothing wrong with that at all.
You can't parody it.
I'm not sure if that's captured. Would that be captured on the recording, or should I?
That's all right.
So Jonathan Pye is a fake, satirical comedian. People will be listening. I think we had a question over there, and then Tricia after that.
Can everyone see how close that I'm holding the microphone? If you talk like this, people can hear you. If you hold it here, they can't. So here, please.
Unless your mouth is in your abdomen.
Will email always be free, or is it one big trap?
Free as in.
Well, at the moment, you have to pay if you're sending a message through the post, but it's free to send emails to anybody all day long. Is it always going to be like that, or is this just one big trap to get us all hooked on it, and then they're going to suddenly start charging us?
Are you talking about email specifically, or you mean any e-message like a Facebook chat or anything like that?
Yes.
They're different things, okay.
Yeah, it all depends on how long the people who pay to advertise believe that they're getting value for money. You get free email because, your email is monitored and ads pop up that are relevant to something you said, or ads pop up in the email, on the screen itself. And that's why it's free. It's free to you because somebody is paying the company that provides the email service to you to put ads in front of your eyes. And as long as the advertisers believe they're getting value for money, they'll keep supporting those free things like free email and, free social media. And for now, the social media and the providers of search engines and email have the people who buy ads bamboozled. They have convinced them that they are getting value for money. I'm skeptical about that, but that's not my field of expertise.
I'm confused so you're happy to receive ads on your email?
You're not. I hate it. Yeah. No, I was just explaining. He asked, will it ever be free? And it's only free because advertisers are paying
no such thing
the
as
company.
A free lunch, really.
Yeah.
Let's use an ad blocker.
Yeah.
Tricia?
I want to take forward the point about the mental problems that can be caused by social media, and particularly I'm concerned about young people and people like Stells and even more, me, who have come to these things quite late in life. Then we had built social relations before, we had established a whole, world of interactions, and then this is kind of some icing on the cake that introduces a new dimension, but we're not totally dependent on it, in that we do remember how to write letters, or perhaps a bit more modern, use the telephone, and then I'm worried about, I don't know if any of you saw that Robert Winston program where they've been following young people across the social spectrum and the sort of economic spectrum, and they were looking at the 16-year-olds, and I think the average time a day they were on social media was about 6 hours. They're in bed at night worrying about it. They can never escape if they're being bullied. When we've all probably been bullied at one time or another, but we could go home and the bullies weren't there. But now they're always there, and I just worry. Along with some of the other points Jeff made, how we can protect people from it and how we can address, I think, we really need a sort of social media literacy, don't we, or computer literacy to help young people do the sort of blocking that Stell talked about, which I don't know if I do that properly, and just how to cope. I think you want to learn life without social media first. And then add them later, rather than be brought up from the age of about, what did they get them, about 9, 10? I think you said Facebook you have to be 13. That's still but I think people lie.
Still very vulnerable.
And it's still very young.
Well, on the point of what do we know about the effects on children, the answer is virtually nothing. Almost all the studies of the psychological effects of social media are done by academic researchers, and so the population of people being studied tends to be college sophomores who want beer money for doing participating in a study. There's no research that I'm aware of that deals with the impact on children, but it's almost impossible to design an ethical study of children that would enable you to answer what the effects are. What we're going to see is we're going to wait down the road and see longitudinally how their lives are different from earlier generations that didn't have social media in their youth, and we're going to try to infer the causes and effects, but it's almost impossible to do any kind of ethical testing to find the psychological effects on children.
But we do know suicides, don't we?
Yeah, it's that sort of it's that sort of statistical data where you have correlations, but you can't prove cause and effect. But it's worrying, and yet you can't really be sure whether there were other confounding factors as well.
It's more challenging for parents, I think. But I think parents need to wake up, and they need to parent and be very careful and very proactive.
I can't see who Sandra put up first, but someone did.
This gentleman,
Simultaneous.
and then Peter perhaps, and then yourself.
Yeah.
Of course. Don't worry.
Surely, as just a very easy, very effective, and hugely successful method of communication, there's nothing truly incompatible with humanistic values, as far as I can see, in social media per se. And I think this is the issue. It's what is potentially incompatible with humanistic values are the people who operate the social media, and also, as you say, the people who advertise on the social media. And I think that is a little bit of a dichotomy in this debate. As far as I can see it, you could go back to the days of yore, and there's no real difference between a town crier who's crying a load of rubbish to someone who's advertising on social media or operating social media and propagating a load of rubbish that may be very contrary to humanistic values. I don't know what you say.
Yeah, and pamphleteers. When the printing press was first invented, people were outraged, weren't they? That now that it's always going to be the case. I think, as you say, it's human nature. It's not the medium.
Ready? Yeah, go.
I couldn't see you to see how closely you have to hold the microphone, but I hope this is all right.
You're doing fine.
As a blind person, I virtually use no social media at all. I have technology. I have an iPhone, but I don't tweet or FaceTime, any of these things. So I'm speaking from outside. But following on from the previous speaker, I think what is incompatible with humanist or human values is capitalism. You talk about advertising. People would never have been able to afford newspapers if most of it wasn't paid for by advertising. And it's who owns and controls these things. We like to think that we're going to control as much as we can, but we find the control is there already before we even buy the stuff. You talk about this thing going on in China. It's happening here, but it's happening in different ways in different places. And we talk about individual choice. Apparently, so it said on the radio the other day, how true this is, I don't know, but half the jobs in this country, in this wonderful so-called democratic country, half the jobs you can only get them if you look good. This is the new skill apparently, to look good, and you laugh. It's not funny. If you once you're 29, 30 years old, that's it. You've had it. What's this as a skill? It's appalling. But the number, and this is employers doing this. It's not people choosing to look good. It's employers enforcing this on people. Employers are basically fascists. This is a serious thing. We live in a world which is dominated by economics. Economics is basically dictatorship. Employers are dictators. You don't go to work to do your thing. You go to work to do somebody else's thing. So the social media is just part of that. You know, is fire a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a very economically based argument there. Can you
over to you, Jeff.
Well, Stelz and I didn't come prepared to discuss the merits of capitalism, so I think we best not make fools of ourselves by saying something we aren't prepared to really reflect on and give an opinion on. But you did name a number of social ills, some of which had nothing whatsoever to do with social media, as far as I could tell. And of course, those things are bad. But, what we wanted to focus on tonight was whether social media advance humanist principles or not. And, I think you've heard the debate there, and, we're happy to take more questions on that issue, because sooner or later we're going to have to come to the second vote.
Let's hear what Fiona's got to say.
I'm worried that Stelz has enough time to make all these connections that she talks about. I have a friend who sends me articles from The Guardian every day, which he thinks I ought to read. And there are hundreds of comments sometimes. You could spend the whole morning just reading these comments from that newspaper or from other blogs that come from America about health. My goodness, they go on and on. I want Stella to tell us how she does the housework, the gardening, all that.
I've never done housework.
Well, that's a good point, isn't it? I mean, it does tend to suck up time, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it does. But, if you've got a smartphone, you can have a look while you're waiting for a bus.
So you're one of these people who's doing it all on a smartphone as you're walking on, bumping other people.
No.
I don't think I can do it when I'm...
She brought her laptop to demonstrate it.
That's a big humanist value. As to get on the pavement, that's
Thank you. Yes. I can empathise with those comments there. I am not a social media user, not because of all the troubles with it that Jeff has listed, but simply time. I've got a very large family. If I spent my time on Facebook, I'd never have time for anything else. Mm-hmm. I have a hunch that social media is more for the extroverts who need the interaction with other people than introverts like myself who can let the world get on with itself and amuse myself quite happily. The thing is, though, social media, though, has been invented, and like so many human inventions and developments, can be used for good or bad. So it's here, it's going to stay, and if you don't like it or not, it is here. And I suppose my question is more pointed to, because of the concerns that Jeff has listed, which I believe are very, very real, how can they be attended to in a way that does address humanist concerns? One suggestion I would make, picking up another point that was said earlier, that with the introduction of regulation, to have the users pay for it so that they have some control, say, on the service they are getting, rather than the providers of the service making money from the advertisers on it. Advertisers will find plenty of ways to advertise, or indeed the users can accept that in paying for it, they can pay something extra to have the advertisers if they want. But it would mean that users have to declare themselves. You cannot have the anonymity that protects all the trolls and the terrorist groups and so on. And that, to me, is one of the great weaknesses of social media. So I'd just be interested, if that were proposed, would you go that way? Just as a final comment, I'm not quite sure how they're going to going to manage under the GDPR rules that are coming in, that we've all been inundated with messages from everywhere, because I would have thought that they're in danger of falling flat within Europe.
Yeah, I'm not sure. You'd have to get all mediums, all platforms to agree to that. I'm not sure in an international world across all borders, I don't know how on earth you'd ever do that.
Well, Yeah, so
Yeah, that you sign up and you pay a subscription, you're saying?
Yeah, like you pay to send a letter, you pay for your telephone service.
Part of the benefit of the internet is anonymity, isn't it?
So you have to register your name and contact details to do these things.
But how would they work out that those are authentic?
Well, something you have to pay. That's
Oh, then there's a credit card. Yeah.
non-authentic things.
but we're not in a world where that could happen now. With Facebook already having 2 billion users and its revenues approaching, $500 billion a year or whatever the number is, it's never going to be possible for a user-paying service to start up and have sufficient numbers of users to be a success. It's the so-called network effect. The Facebooks and the Twitters and the Instagrams of the world have such large networks that anybody who wants to start up with a different business model is almost certainly going to be just wiped out.
Well, it's
by
a
whom?
problem similar to what the Peter was raising. I think there is an economical dimension too. So I think Ian or someone here had a question. Is there? And then Dan. Go on.
Right, okay, so I came here tonight because I was intrigued by the proposition. To me, it made all the sense of a proposition: are tomatoes compatible with humanist values? Those two things, social media and humanist values, I don't believe implicitly have anything to say about each other. Social media is a vehicle for people, and as we've seen tonight, I've thoroughly enjoyed tonight, even though I think that the proposition is thoroughly ridiculous. Social media can be a vehicle for those ugly and those beautiful sides of humanity, and for us to display dispositions like everyone wanting to look beautiful. I mean, the expression "keeping up with the Joneses" came up, existed a long time before social media. I think it's possibly a vehicle and some kind of a steroidal instrument for society. So I think it boils down to the idea of, is social media compatible with humanist values? I believe the question you're really asking is, are humans compatible with humanist values?
Okay, so actually I think... so I think you went from saying the question is ridiculous to actually saying the question has some real merit to it. What I wanted to say, but you almost said it for me, is that what people do on social media is a form of human activity, and humanist values and principles are thought to apply to the whole broad range of human activity. At least those of us in this room think so. And so it's certainly possible to judge the type of human activity that consists of going on a social medium and interacting with other people, to say whether or not it's compatible with the broad principles of humanism. So I don't think the question was absurd, but you can. I'm happy if you still think so.
Tonight has been a wonderful demonstration of being able to present the flip side of everything. I mean, if you give me an example of how social media is destroying humanist values, I can give you an equally good example on the same, on the same topic that shows how social media is actually supporting that particular humanist value.
Yeah.
If I could try and clarify this, which is why I said, going back to the question, after they had their 10 minutes, I said, let's go back to the question and zero in on compatible. Because like so many things, rather than trying to find an answer and come to a decision, we'll have a vote. Really, maybe what we're discussing is, what do we mean by compatible? What do we mean by humanist values? And what do we mean by social media? And hopefully improve our understanding of those and take that away, rather than only just trying to shift the vote from for or against.
Well, we phrased the question at the outset in a binary fashion. Are they compatible or are they not? I think probably everybody in the room would honestly say they are compatible to a degree, and to a degree they are not compatible. But if you want to have a vote on something just for fun, it's easier to pose it as a binary choice. And even though you no longer believe that it's a binary choice, please vote one way or the other at the end. Just for the fun of it, just for the fun of it. Okay.
Okay, thanks. I'd like to pick up on something that Peter said, and Alan a bit. Anyway. I mean, we heard a lot from Jeff about the bad stuff about the way Facebook in particular behaves, and the manipulation, the advertising, the making of buckets of money, which strikes me as being sort of normal capitalist sort of behaviour. It's the sort of behaviour that we worry about banks doing in particular, and we talk about regulating the banks even if we fail to do it. So I'm kind of wondering whether, Jeff, I mean, you're sort of, I assume that you don't have a problem with the existence of banks, or you don't think that banks are incompatible with humanist values. Now, I mean, I think the behaviour of a lot of bankers is fundamentally incompatible with humanist values, but we deal with that and we try to regulate it, and we try to manage it through a political system. So my suggestion really is that if we have problems with the way social media is run, and we see big downsides in that, then the answers are to deal with the way social media is run, rather than to write it off as being incompatible with our values.
So you favor the regulatory approach that Alan was suggesting?
Because some people, and I know them personally as well, I mean, to go back to the question of what's the use of having this kind of debate, I know some people who say, well, social media, the internet, it's fake news, and they actually do say, humanists, are a lot of people out there who think that's not for me at all. I mean, kind of maybe more, not quite what Alan is, but very much towards even further than Alan's in that position, they would say, no, because I value critical thinking and reasoning and learning from books and so on, so I'm not going to have any truck with Facebook or Twitter or the internet. I think there are some people with that kind of position, and that is as we've seen today, it's quite an ill-founded one, because there's loads of benefits of social media that do help humanism and other movements.
There are no lines in books.
Sorry?
There are no lines in books.
Well, exactly that's the point there. But again, I'm not saying that I hold this view, but there are people who do hold the view, and you'd be surprised how they don't engage with some of the positive aspects of social media that Stella is putting forward.
Yeah, I mean, I instinctively agree with Jeff, and I'm just really concerned about also the economic aspects of it, but also the really insidious aspect of social media, which to me seems to encourage mass hate. And the whole phenomenon, nobody's really talked about the phenomenon of trolling and what happens to any woman who just puts their head above the parapet.
Yeah.
And this just seems to me of a degree that you can't compare with the 18th century pamphlets and the things that you're saying social media is just a modern version of. I don't think it is. I think it is something quite different. And it's not really being addressed properly, I don't think. So in terms of the question just is in my head, is if something that really encourages the worst aspects of human nature, how you can say that is compatible with humanist values. It just seems obvious to me that it's not.
I think it's the anonymity, isn't it, that somehow allows people to be so obnoxious, and we just didn't have a medium where people could hide their identity before.
Yeah, so what isn't really known is whether those impulses to be hateful and spiteful and nasty and harmful in what you say previously existed, and it's only the anonymity plus the megaphone effect of being able to broadcast to millions of people that has brought it out. People have tried to answer that, and I don't think any of the research that people have come up with has really satisfied it. But even in something that I don't think is social media, but I think you might, the comments to newspapers, if you look at that, it's gotten very, very hateful in the last decade or two. It never used to be like that when I was a kid. So something is going on, and people are feeling freer to express what used to be ideas that would get you slapped down and disciplined and corrected, but don't anymore.
Once the volume starts getting turned up, and then that becomes the norm, and then people feel that they have to get more and more outrageous. I don't know. But it is disturbing.
It's kind of my question just really follows from what has just been said, and it's something that I was thinking about from the beginning of the talk. I see it clearly as certain evolutions in society, things that are changing, and that these tendencies have come from very far back. So individualism is growing. It used to be that you couldn't think very far away from what people in your town thought.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
whatever the priest told you, you were supposed to think. And we have been moving away from that for a very long time. That's what I call individualism. There is also more materialism, or more, you know, the force of the economic argument is also stronger. So things that used to be negative can be seen as being today more negative or more of a threat. Yes, so it's different being harassed by a couple of people in your town than if you're a woman being harassed online by anyone who's ever heard of you. Clearly. But there's also, we have to take the flip side and see that more individualism allows for people to be free thinkers more readily, allows for also the kind of society in which we live today, which is a little more sophisticated. So when we have a new technology, we tend to just go completely nuts and use it badly. But then we learn. And if we say, you know, that this technology is bad, what are we going to do? Are we going to set it aside and not use it? No.
That's not an option,
it's
is it?
here. We have no choice. So we use it, and we try to be, as you know, the better angels of our nature, as Pinker would say. We try to kind of take this thing and say, okay, we have opportunities, challenges and opportunities. Let's focus on the opportunities.
So are you saying that you can't live without social media in this day and age?
I don't think we have the choice. So we could all decide here that it's done us individually more harm than good. Imagine that we all decided that. So then what do we do? Well, that's not going to. That's not. We're not discussing. We're not discussing individually whether you're going to use it or I'm going to use it. We're trying to decide whether it is compatible. It's a bigger discussion. It's not just yourself. I can decide very easily for myself to what degree. For instance, I have a Facebook account. I never gave Facebook my actual anything. Facebook doesn't know anything about me.
No,
because
you can give false information.
Yeah, I gave false information. I had to give. I remember I had to give a zip code. They made a zip code up. I don't know what zip code I gave. So you know, individually, you can defend yourself and you can choose what you do. And like Stels does, you can use it as a force for good. There is negative things that very vulnerable people are exposed to. Children. Yes, I think their parents should be, and this is something that is communicated very, very often. Parents, please pay attention to what your children are doing. But then afterwards, we can't do away with it as a whole. You cannot use it, or I can choose not to use it. You can't make a way, put it to the side completely. So we have to take the challenge and do the best that we can by being humanists and holding on to our values.
Just had a comment there, Paul.
Just very, very quickly. Hypothetically speaking, suppose that humanists as a body use social media so effectively that we manage to turn every person in the world into humanists.
Yeah.
Would it be contrary to, humanistic values?
Yeah. No, not in that case, no.
Well, that's my point, really.
Yeah.
It's been hugely instrumental in spreading humanism, I think.
And the vice versa stands. I mean, if a really evil body managed to change everyone's opinion via social media into evil people, then you would say that it was evil. But it's not the medium. It's the message. It's the ideology.
Yeah, as philosophical crutches, I always like to get to. Anyone else?
Can I use the mic? Just enough. So I had a couple of thoughts myself. One, my daughter Elise, she's a very small business, I think Kieran mentioned. She's a photographer, and she's got no other way of getting business other than by putting stuff out on social media and connections to it. Jeff, you mentioned about people making themselves more beautiful from China. My daughter tells me that every picture published on mainstream medium is always photoshopped. It always has been. So, it's always been done. It's just the medium that's different.
Interesting, yeah.
It's just a couple of thoughts.
In China, the problem I see is that they feel now it's impolite not to do so. You and I used to have photographs right out of the Kodak, camera, that cost only... Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right, I am. I used to develop them myself. Did, yeah. And there was no way of enhancing those. Before Photoshop was invented, you just were stuck with it.
A brief comment, I think, which sort of might turn into a question. And I've been monitoring, I would rather speak without it. I think it's...
You've got no choice.
Right, okay. So basically, I've been monitoring, the impact of social media in the Islamic world, and especially in the context of the proliferation of Wahhabism, the most pernicious, version of Islam.
Keep the mic in front.
Shall I stand up?
No. You were.
I'm not used to.
Yeah, you were turning. You were.
Right. Okay.
As soon as you turned the mic to the side, we lost you.
I just want to draw your attention to the use of social media by some Islamist groups across the Islamic world.
Yeah.
And perhaps most importantly, the propagation of the Wahhabi version of Islam, the most unacceptable and the most pernicious side of Islam, I would say. And to what extent the lack of social media would have served human principles in the Islamic world, going back to the 60s and 70s and those socialist movements, which were partly suppressed with the help of the West, allegedly. For example, Iran, when a secular government was overthrown back in the 60s and 70s, and then a number of other examples where Turkey is probably a recent example when the secular military tried to overthrow the allegedly pro-Islamic prime minister. And he used the social media.
Do you think that social media has helped?
It hasn't, no. No, it has. To my understanding is that... no, it hasn't. Because I receive Twitter messages and videos every day from my Muslim friends reminding me of the superiority of Islam. And they basically get it from somewhere and then pass it on. So we must be aware of the negative impact it is having, especially in the Islamic world. Yeah. And it's partly true in India as well. I've just come back from India, and the kind of stuff that is in the social media promoting more fundamentalist sort of version of Hinduism is astonishing, really. So I would like to sort of hear your comments on that.
But is that a reaction to the fact that atheism is spreading to what they think an alarming degree?
Yeah.
And I think I would like to think it's because the major religions of the world are in their death throes, and they are behaving in this rather radicalised way, and that is a reaction to the growing secularism and atheism in the world.
When you talk to a lot of these, guys you bump into who become religious, overnight, and ask them why, and they said they watched this video by this imam, or that's all. So I'm wondering if there was no social media, would these guys be humanist or
No, I'm
secular?
sure it is spreading faster, but I do think
Yeah.
there is a way to contact people who have only been told that this one particular book is the answer to everything. Now their imam or their priest or their vicar can't tell them that anymore because they can find out that
I'm
other
not talking
people
about
have
average, average person. I'm talking about really vulnerable and stupid people, who can be very easily influenced by. And the way religious fundamentalist, organizations have exploited them, use the social media in the Islamic world, cannot be really underestimated.
I suppose that is quite interesting. Do you both reckon
I would appreciate your comments on that.
Okay, thanks. You both reckon that you would have, because you, as a my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but you found humanism and converted out of your previous worldview much later on in life, or earlier on?
I was probably in my teens, I think. But I was one of these people that didn't really think very much about religion.
Okay. Anyway.
I just didn't buy into it, but I didn't become overtly critical of it until probably...
But do you have a sense of, would that have happened earlier if you had grown up in, say, my generation? Or
I think it would. Yeah.
Well, I began to have doubts. I was raised in a Lutheran family, and I began to have doubts in my early teens, maybe actually as 12, 13, that early, when I discovered science. So science caused me to question religion, and I did this all on my own. I wasn't telling anybody. I wanted to be a dutiful son. I didn't want my parents to know I was doubting what they wanted me to believe, and I had no social network to support me in coming to my unbelief. But on the other hand, there might have been a social network at that time that I would have fallen into, which would have said, "Oh, you can't abandon Lutheranism. You'll go to hell and burn." So I'm not sure that the social media, if they had existed then, would have helped me. It's hard to say.
But it's certainly it would have helped you perhaps break out of that local social network and get to an international one, like a lot of Muslims are finding, where there aren't the
I think that's a good point.
cultural barriers.
Yeah, if you can break out of your locality. I was in a silo. It was called the Midwest. And if I could have broken out, it would have been good. Yeah.
But just to play devil's advocate on some of the points that I picked up there before, we seem to be saying that online, certain sort of hateful comments, the lady mentioned trolling, one of the humanist values is freedom of expression. So as a devil's advocate, sometimes I want to swear. Sometimes I want to have my,
self-expression.
The person in the corner of the pub, typically, has had a few or hasn't had a few, and they want to just sort of have their voice and in speaker's corner. Are we trying to censor? Are humanists having a political correctness?
Yeah, I wouldn't censor anything.
Yeah, you wouldn't censor anything. But we seem to be saying that social media, humanity's gone to pot because look at all of these bad and sweary comments on news forums. But what if that's just how humans behave?
Yeah,
they swear at each other.
And they do.
Maybe that shouldn't be we shouldn't rush a judgment on that. What do you think? Because there is a ugly side of humanity that people do get angry, and sometimes we do socially condition ourselves face to face not to do it. Is there positive that we have this,
that you're able to have a jolly good old vent?
And if it makes other people angry, then don't read the comments.
That's right. Well, Stephen Fry says, you're outraged, so the fuck what? Sorry, we'll edit that bit out.
So I don't know whether spewing out hate vents it and relieves you of it, or whether it's a reinforcement. I'm not so sure the safety valve theory is correct. I think it may just.
It can cut
yeah.
Tricia, is that comment?
Well,
get you recorded.
I mean, as with so many human rights, it isn't unlimited in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the freedom of expression. It's so long as you don't incite other people to violence. There are borderlines where different human rights conflict with each other. So stirring up people to be violent, to kill others and so on, you don't have freedom of expression to do that. There are things...
Or shouting fire in a crowded theatre.
But I also wanted to come... Yeah, exactly. But I also wanted to come... Well, then it's a good idea. To the idea, of some of the fantastic things that have been achieved through social media, which I think Stel's referred to briefly, but things like, some of the atheist bloggers that we wouldn't know about, and we're able to protect them when they go to prison. And I'm sure many of us here belong to lots of these campaigning organizations, Reprieve and 38 Degrees and all these others, which I think can do terrific work and help us know about things that are going on that we wouldn't know about, and not only know about it, but do something about it and get large numbers to lobby politicians. So I think that's a very valuable tool.
Good point. Yeah.
But the final comments there, I think we'll just have time to take a vote after that and then wrap things up.
Yes, the other side of that, though, is slacktivism. And I've got a big B. I think a whole lot of people, they love to go online, and it makes them feel really good because they think they're being active, and they're not really. They just have a little rant, and then all their friends copy it. And that doesn't really help much, but can help a bit, yeah.
So, you want to do our vote?
Do you have any final comments on what Trish said?
No, I'm all burnt out.
Caroline, did you want to say something?
I was going to say something.
No, go ahead. We have time. One comment.
I was just going to say that. I hate these discussions. Sorry. Okay. I was just going to say that I see it as very positive. There's a lot of nastiness on there, but I also see it as challenging the establishment.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of issues around censorship which nobody's talked really about.
Absolutely,
and, people talk about advertising. Well, before social media, there's always issues. We've been there before, we've been here before. Subliminal advertising used to talk about was the big buzzword, and this has always been going on.
everyone. Since printing, the printing press, since TV, this is nothing new. So, the idea that, are we political agents? We have some agency. We're not all gullible. The idea that we're just so easily manipulated. Maybe some people are. Maybe some people are, not very critical. But I don't think we're that gullible and, he's that easily manipulated. So that's really just, I think, about the establishment. Don't like social media. I think it does, there's always been censorship in this society as well. Some censorship, you're not as free as compared to some other countries in other parts of the world. We are freer, but not as compared to America. I think they've got a lot more freedom of expression. So that's what I was going to say.
Thank you. Yeah, no, great. Thank you.
Thanks for your comment.
Can I make a suggestion? We're going to vote again.
Yeah.
My suggestion is that only the people that voted before, who were here for the first vote again. And those that came in late will want your vote afterwards, but let's do it separately. We want to see what the effect of the conversation that we had. So, is social media compatible with humanist values? Is that the question?
Humanist principles or values, yeah.
Humanist, right.
If
you agree, can you put your hand up? And you voted before, can you put your hand up? Okay, so...
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.
No, you didn't. People left, so you didn't lose a vote.
Okay. And how about disagree with that motion? Let's count them up.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Do I get to vote?
Yeah, I think so.
9.
Okay, so one more question.
No, but swung the needle a little.
Abstentions. Can anyone put up the hand that changed their mind? Who changed their
Somebody
mind?
had to have.
Alan.
Look
Tell
at
us
that.
why. Tell us
Alan
why.
and Paula both.
I see much good in social media, and on the motion as specifically worded, I see it as a medium, and initially I took it at that, but I think Jeff has listed all the maluse of social media, and I think that is something to be dealt with, and that is why I changed my vote in that direction.
Thank you.
Well, I've changed my vote because I've come to view social media in the very narrowest sense, and I don't think it's good for me. I waste huge amounts of time, and I always feel a lot better if I've spent 2 hours reading a book than looking at gossip columns. So I'm looking at it in a very subjective and narrow way, and I'm not going to vote the same as my brother.
Seems like a good reason.
Is that Kieran's sister?
Fiona, sorry, you said something about abstentions. Well, who changed from one way to abstentions? Did anyone?
Paula changed.
Okay, you did. Okay.
Abstention, I changed from a yes to a no. I think there is a bit of good and bad in either way, and it was just, as Jeff said, just vote.
Fiona, do you want to make a comment?
No, I want to vote abstain.
Okay.
Please, can someone make a note that Fiona voted abstain? Yes, sir.
And me. And Peter.
Well, okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you, audience. You've been great.
Thank you very much. Really good. Really good meeting. Well done.
I'm really glad we did this. It was really a lot of fun.